most of us, is a gender lunch, which was very well attended and participated. So we are going to begin in 1 minute this afternoon session. That will continue until 4 p.m. And we expect also to have our session tomorrow morning at 9 to finish the consideration of all the items on the agenda. So in 30 seconds, we are going to begin. All right, good afternoon. We begin this session of our committee meeting that we call to order. So please, colleagues, switch off your mobile phones. When you speak especially, don't keep it close to the interpreter's equipment. As I said, this session will close at 4 p.m. Now we have distributed the agenda for this afternoon meeting, and so I propose that we adopt it. This morning, as you know, we concluded the debate on the report and the draft resolution presented by our rapporteur, and so we now move to consider the amendments to the resolution. And if time permits, we will also move on to consider one supplementary item, the one on addressing racism and xenophobia affecting people of African descent in the OSCE region. So I propose that the draft agenda for this afternoon be adopted. Are there any objections? If not, thank you, the agenda is adopted. So we now move to consider the amendments to the draft resolution. There have been 38 amendments which have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available to the participants. So if you don't have it, please, they should be outside the room on the tables. In light of the number of amendments, I probably will have to speak limits on the time to present and oppose the amendments, but at the same time, I would like to propose, because we might have enough time between this afternoon session and tomorrow's session, that on the amendments to the draft resolution, which is the main document that our committee and then the Assembly is going to adopt in our Monaco declaration, we keep the possibility open, if there is such a request, to have not one in favor and one against, but to have 2 in favor and 2 against. Also, and always with a limited time, but to give the opportunity to all the parliamentarians who wish to speak to do so. So that's my proposal, but then we have to see how the works of the committee will develop and if we can manage with the time frame that we have adopted. So as I said, will be the presenter of the amendment, then 1 in favor and 2 against it, according to the request that we receive. So after that, as you know, I will ask for the rapporteur for his opinion, then we proceed to the vote. So we move to the consideration of the amendments. We start with number 1, and I call on Mr. Guminski from Belarus to propose.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Я представлю эту поправку, предлагая изменения в первый пункт нашей резолюции. Мы исходили из следующего. В этом пункте цитируется текст 7 статьи Хельсинского заключительного акта. Нам представляется, что передавать содержание этой статьи следует в полной мере без каких-либо корректировок, изъятий или дополнительных формулировок, чтобы не искажать смысл основного документа. Это очень серьезный документ, и он заслуживает нашего весьма уважительного и корректного отношения. Нам представляется, что это оправданный подход. Спасибо.
All right. Anybody wants to speak against amendment number 1? If not, I will call on Mr. Charos to give his opinion about the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment speaks about the universal significance of, rather than my original text, respect for human rights. And I believe, in my opinion, this downgrades the meaning to a sense that human rights are maybe voluntary or ad hoc issues rather than a universal commitment. So I am not in favor of this rephrase.
Thank you, Mr. Charos. So we now move to vote on amendment number 1. Those in favor of this amendment, please raise your cards. All right, thank you. Those against, please raise your cards. Thank you. Abstentions? 1 abstention. So amendment number 1 is rejected. I now call on Mr. Rashkin of the Russian Federation to present amendment number 2. You have the floor, sir.
Уважаемые коллеги, на наш взгляд, необходим более общий комплексный подход к оценке итогов документа Мадридской встречи 1983 года. И мы бы просили добавить, именно добавить в пункте 1, добавить следующий пункт. Вновь обращая внимание на необходимость сбалансированного подхода ко всем 3 измерениям – военно-политическому, экономико-экологическому и человеческому. Это более расширенное понимание и более комплексом подошло бы к оценке данной ситуации. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Rashkin. Does anybody wish to speak against amendment number 2? If not, I'll call on Mr. Charos to give us his opinion on the amendment. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I have no any difficulties with, let's say, such a general remark, so I'm in favor of.
All right, thank you very much. So we move to vote on amendment number 2. Those in favor of amendment number 2, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? 2 against. Abstentions? No abstentions. So amendment number 2 is adopted. We move to amendment number 3, and I call on Heidi Fry from Canada to present the amendment.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 3, which says, recalling that at the United Nations Beijing Conference in 1995, women's rights were recognized as de facto human rights. They were not recognized as women's rights. They were not recognized as gender rights. They were actually reaffirming that women are human beings, and that as human beings, we deserve equal treatment as every other human being. I just wanted to reiterate that, because to even recognize it in 1995 for the very first time, the world agreed that women were humans is a relatively amazing thing. So all I wanted us to do was to reiterate this and to remember this and to ensure it's written in this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, yes, okay. Mr. Belarus from Ukraine, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, this amendment is a little bit funny because it's with this phrasing de facto, we limited the rights of women. If we wish to keep this de facto human right, we should add de facto and de jure because de facto means some limitation of women's rights.
Thank you, Mr. Belarus. Although we don't have Latin interpretation, I think it's quite clear what you're proposing. So maybe Ms. Fry could accept this oral amendment.
I actually, I agree with the amendment, but we all de jure believe that women's rights are human rights. The reality is that the de facto rights are never realized. But I'm quite happy to have de jure written in. Thank you.
Okay, so we can accept this oral amendment, and I ask to Mr. Charles his opinion on it.
Mr. Chairman, the rapporteur is okay with it.
Thank you very much. So we put the amendment to the vote. Those in favor of amendment number 3, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. So amendment number 3 is approved. I now call again on Belarus, maybe Ms. Mazai, to present amendment number 4. You have the floor,
Спасибо,
madam.
господин председатель. Предлагая эту поправку, мы исходим из того, что, как известно, анализ нарушений прав человека во всех государствах-участниках ОБСЕ не проводился. Поэтому использование неопределенной формулировки «многие государства» может означать практически во всех государствах, некоторых государствах одновременно. В этой связи белорусская делегация подготовила поправку добавить новый пункт вместо этого пункта, который касается проблематики прав человека и основан на сбалансированной формулировке Астанинской декларации 2010 года. Предлагаем поэтому 5-й пункт заменить новой редакцией. Спасибо.
Yes, all right, but before replacing, we have to vote on either keeping or deleting this paragraph. So anybody wish to speak against amendment number 4, which would delete paragraph 5? None? If so, I'll ask the rapporteur his opinion on this amendment. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, the proposal to delete paragraph 5 I cannot support, because I already also said in my presentation that in my original text pointing out that in 2012 human rights are still violated in many OSCE participant states is very relevant. So I am against deleting this paragraph.
All right, so we put amendment number 4 to the vote. Those in favor of this amendment, please raise your card. All right, those against? Thank you. Abstentions? None, so amendment number 4 is rejected. Again, I call on Ms. Mazai to present amendment number 5.
Господин председатель, мы предлагали после 5-го пункта сделать новый пункт, именно приведя в соответствие с Астанинской декларацией, подписанной главами всех государств, членов ОБСЕ. Мне не очень понятна позиция нашего докладчика, равно как и по пункту 1, когда мы говорим о всеобщем уважении прав человека. Он говорит, что это факультативно. Я не очень понимаю. Точно так же и здесь. Формулировки Астанинской декларации очень сбалансированы в этой части. В чем проблема? Ответ у докладчика. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against amendment number 5? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment elevates the 2010 Astana Declaration And I think I have no any problems, and it's also harmless to mention it here, so I agree with this amendment.
Thank you very much. We now move to vote on amendment number 5. Those in favor of amendment number 5, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? None. So the amendment number 5 is unanimously adopted. I call on Ms. Mazai again to present amendment number 6.
Поправка номер 6 касается одной позиции нашей резолюции, где права в области прав человека определяются как минимальные стандарты. Я думаю, что обязательства ОБСЕ носят политический характер, и считаться минимальными стандартами они никак не могут. Поэтому мы предлагаем внести эту корректировку. Спасибо.
Thank you, Ms. Mazai. Anybody wish to speak against amendment number 6, which would delete paragraph 6, actually? None? So we ask Mr. Choros his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I already mentioned in Vienna, and I can repeat that human rights are minimum standards. And therefore, I'm really strongly against this amendment to delete the whole of paragraph 6.
Thank you very much. So we put amendment 6 to the vote. Those in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. All right. Those against? Abstentions? 1 abstention. So the amendment number 6 is rejected. I call on Ms. Mazai also to present amendment number 7. You have the floor, ma'am.
Мы предлагаем пункт 7 снять только по той простой причине, что он дублирует пункт 5 нашей резолюции. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? No? So we ask Mr. Choros his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I already mentioned that in some countries the democracy and sometimes human rights is backsliding, so I'm against this amendment, and I would say that paragraph 7, as it is written by me, is a good one.
Thank you very much. I don't want to interfere in the debate, but we certainly appreciate your work. We put the amendment number 7 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? None. So amendment number 7 is rejected. I now call on Ms. Lundqvist Bromster from Sweden to present amendment number 8. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 7, and I want to focusing on the media's role. It's important that we specify everyone's right to freedom of opinion and expression, and that's the right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek and receive and impart information and ideas through any media. I think it's very important. And I hope that you can support me in this amendment.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we ask, we have Mr. Belarus from Ukraine. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would completely support this, but I have some problem with this phrasing. I have Russian text, I will read it in Russian. Распространять информацию идею любыми средствами. Я бы заменил слово любыми средствами на слово легальными средствами. Legal means.
So there is a proposal by Mr. Belarus to change the paragraph. I don't know if the sponsor of the amendment can accept it or not. Please, you have the floor.
No, I cannot accept it because media is independent. That's the meaning in this text.
Okay. So if the, I don't know, I mean, the procedure for oral amendments is based on common agreement. So if it is not accepted, we cannot, I think, change before we put the amendment to the vote. And I will call on Mr. Choros to give his opinion on this
Mr.
amendment.
Chairman, the freedom of opinion and expression is one of the crucial elements of human rights. And I'm also not in favor to the suggestion which was made by colleague Belarus to limit it to only the legal media. So I support the proposal because I think it's also complement my text.
All right, thank you very much. So we put amendment number 8 to vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? 1. Abstentions? No, 3 actually. Abstentions? None. So amendment number 8 is approved. I call again on Ms. Lundqvist Bromster to present amendment number 9 from Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to insert even here a new paragraph after paragraph 7. I think it's important recalling the mandate of the OSCE representation on freedom of the media, stating that independent and pluralistic media are essential to a free and open society, and so on. And I thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against amendment number 9? If not, we call on the rapporteur to give us his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I can repeat the importance of media as I argued before. I support this amendment.
So we put the amendment to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? None. So it is unanimously adopted. Amendment number 9. We move to amendment number 10, and I call on Mr. Rashkin from the Russian Federation to present this amendment.
Уважаемые коллеги, пункт 8 предлагаем исключить ввиду отсутствия в нем существенной смысловой нагрузки. Спасибо.
Okay. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment number 5, which would delete paragraph 8? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with this amendment because paragraph 8 is an important one, especially the word monitoring, because we should also monitor what we are doing. So I'm not in favor of this amendment number 10.
Thank you very much. So we move to vote on the amendment number 10. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Okay. The amendment number 10 is adopted. Sooner or later I had to make this mistake. I knew it from the beginning. So amendment number 10 is rejected. We now move to amendment number 11, and I call on Ms. Muradova from Azerbaijan to present it. You have the floor, madam.
Так, естественно, пункт 8 мы не собираемся и не предлагаем исключить, но, конечно, хотелось бы конкретизировать данный момент, и в связи с этим мы предлагаем, считая необходимым пересмотреть и укрепить инструменты АРИ ОБСЕ с целью оказания помощи государственным участникам в деле выполнения действующих обязательств в области человеческого измерения. Правда, господин докладчик говорит о мониторинге выполнения государственными участниками, но в конечном итоге это мониторинг, это не новые какие-то политические обязательства. И я бы хотела конкретно узнать мнение докладчика. Мне кажется, более конкретизированная форма доступна и более реальна.
Thank you, Ms. Aslanova. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? No? So we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, in paragraph, as I mentioned, specific tool for human rights monitoring and reporting like the Moscow mechanism, I don't think that we should delete, as proposed by Azerbaijan, mention of these important tools, unique to the OSCE. Moscow mechanisms is rarely applied, which is why I think it's good that I call on it to be applied more, as there are many more cases where the human rights tool would be useful. So I am not in favor of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Charos. So we put Amendment 11 to the vote. Those in favor of this amendment, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? None. So the amendment number 11, one abstention, yes, sorry. Amendment number 11 is rejected. Now call on Ms. von Kramon from Germany to present amendment number 12. You have the floor.
Ja, vielen Dank. Wir glauben oder ich glaube, dass es sinnvoll ist, bevor jemand den Vorsitz der OSZE übernimmt, weil er damit ja auch eine gewisse Verantwortung und die Repräsentation der OSZE übernimmt, ist es gut, nochmal einen offiziellen Mechanismus einzurichten, der dazu führt, um zu überprüfen, ob auch wirklich alle Verpflichtungen, die mit der OSZE einhergehen, eingehalten werden. Und da liegt es uns besonders am Herzen, ob eben auch die Menschenrechte in der Form eingehalten werden, wie es erforderlich ist, wenn jemand als vorsitzendes Land die OSZE nach außen vertritt. Wir haben gesehen, dass das insbesondere bei Kasachstan nicht unbedingt immer und an jeder Stelle der Fall war. Wir sehen jetzt, dass es auch mit der Ukraine schwierig wird, dass die Verpflichtungen in Bezug auf die Menschenrechte eingehalten werden. Von daher würden wir uns wünschen, dass es einen Vorabkatalog gibt und das Land nochmal einer besonderen Überprüfung überzogen werden könnte. Danke.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment, number 12? If not, we call on the rapporteur to give us his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This theme was one of the three pillars I mentioned also in my report. Of course, the chair has a very important role, maybe a double responsibility, because everybody is looking at the chair. And I already stated here that I'm in favor of this amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So we put amendment number 12 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Two against. Abstentions? None. So one. Yes. So amendment number 12 is adopted. I call now on Ms. Mazai from Belarus to present amendment number 13. You have the floor.
Спасибо. Господин председатель, мы с полным уважением относимся к той огромной работе, которую проделал докладчик и при составлении доклада, и при подготовке резолюции. Но в данном пункте при составлении его осуществлены определенные манипуляции с цитатами документов. Заседание Совета министров иностранных дел ОБСЕ 2005 года, и документа Копенгагенского совещания Конференции по человеческому измерению ОБСЕ 90-го года. Эти манипуляции существенным образом искажают первоначально заложенный смысл в этих важных документах. Поэтому полагаю, что привести текст в точное соответствие с первоисточниками нам просто необходимо. Спасибо.
Thank you, Ms. Mazai. Anybody against this amendment? If not, we call on the rapporteur to express his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Rapporteur, I tried not to, what was said, manipulating. At least I tried not to manipulate. I'm against this amendment because, and that's the important argument, replacing human dimension with justice undermines the concept of the legal OSCE commitment to the full human dimension, not only the justice-related issues. So against these amendments.
All right, those in favor of amendment number 13, Ms. Mazai, again.
Господин председатель, в таком случае я бы предложила уважаемому докладчику снять ссылки на эти документы.
Well, I don't know if this is a proposal to change your amendment.
Слишком вольно обращаться с текстами принятых документов, я думаю, нам не следует.
All right, but this is a procedural question. If you want to replace your original amendment with a different oral amendment, you let me know and we ask the rapporteur his opinion. If not, we have to proceed to vote on the amendment you presented.
Я предложила господину докладчику, если он снимет цитирование и упоминание документов, пожалуйста.
Well, the rapporteur cannot auto-amend his own report. So if it's your proposal, we take into consideration. It cannot be his proposal. So in that case, we move on to vote on your original amendment. So we put amendment number 13 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? 2 abstentions. So amendment number 13 is rejected. I now call on Heidi Fry from Canada to present amendment number 14. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things that I'm asking is that you insert a new paragraph 10 after paragraph 10 that says, recalling that because of the values of traditional societies, women have unequal access to legal procedures in order to pursue justice and the protection of their rights, especially concerning domestic violence, property ownership, and dissolution of marriage. In fact, this is often enshrined in the law in certain cultures that women cannot own property, that women must or can be allowed to be subjected to certain forms of domestic violence, and that on dissolution of marriage, women cannot therefore share any money, properties, or pensions of their husbands, and especially with regard to custody of the children. This is because of religious traditions, etc., and especially amongst indigenous peoples, I know, there is no right to property ownership, they're communal societies, so this does disenfranchise women in today's societies. They're at a disadvantage, and I wanted to ensure that women have equal access to shares in property, in pensions, in custody of their children, on dissolution of marriage, and that they are protected by the state against forms of domestic and societal violence.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, this tables an important topic, and I think I mentioned it already in Vienna, that in my opinion, human rights are for everybody, anytime and everywhere. and it could not be limited by cultural or other reasons, so I support this amendment.
Thank you very much. We put amendment number 14 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? One against. Abstention? None. So amendment number 14 is adopted. We now move to the next amendment, number 15, which will be presented by our generous host, Mr. Gardetto from Monaco.
Monsieur le Président, merci beaucoup. C'est un amendement que vous avez co-signé avec moi et qui a fait référence à un conflit social, donc une grève au Kazakhstan, où la répression a été violente. Les grévistes ont été emprisonnés, leurs défenseurs et les membres de l'opposition qui ont également été emprisonnés et torturés. J'ai des rapports d'Amnesty International, de Human Rights Watch, etc., qui en attestent. Et il y a eu 100 personnes blessées, 16 morts. Et donc, il y a eu un procès contre les animateurs de ces grèves qui demandaient simplement une amélioration de leurs conditions de travail dans l'industrie pétrolière. Le procureur général, dans ses procès contre ces personnes, a dit que l'une des causes des troubles était d'avoir soutenu justement les grévistes. Et donc, il est manifeste que ces procès avaient une nature politique, d'où cet amendement qui a pour but de regretter, c'est très modéré, les termes sont très modérés, hein, de regretter les événements qui se sont passés dans le cadre des procès relatifs à ces grévistes emprisonnés et maltraités.
So thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against? I think Professor Akhmetov from Kazakhstan. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the National Commission for Human Rights of Kazakhstan, I would like to attract your attention to the following. The authorities of Kazakhstan have made every effort to make the court proceedings related to the event in Genosian open and transparent for NGOs, the media, and international observers. Meanwhile, the Office of the Prosecutor General conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing more than 1,000 potential witnesses and gathering more than 2,000 witness reports. I would also like to know that our partners, the European Union and its member states, the United States, and a number of international observers acknowledged our efforts. The US delegation in Vienna at the OSCE Permanent Council meeting on June 21st has underlined the transparency of the trials in Aktau, as well as media access, and welcomed the government's attempts to bring to justice not only private persons who broke the law by engaging in violent acts, but also police and other officials who abused or overstepped their authority. The main cause of the tragic events is labor dispute, is now settled. The strikers got new jobs. A new development strategy for Genosian is adopted. A number of measures have been taken to prevent the same mistake in future, including an OSCE-sponsored police training project. Therefore, I would like to propose to delete the amendment number 15, because the amendment says it is politically motivated. We don't accept this kind of approach.
Thank you, Mr. Akhmetov. I have now another request to speak, I think in favor of the amendment, so there is also an opportunity for another speaker to speak against. As I said, 2 in favor and 2 against. So I will give the floor to Ms. Viola von Kraun from Germany, and then to a speaker if there is against the amendment. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich würde sehr darum werben, dass wir dieses Amendment beibehalten, weil es in der Tat sich hier um einen sehr tragischen Fall handelt. Es war, wie jeder weiß, eine Auseinandersetzung, wo es eigentlich um eine Lohnerhöhung ging. Und man hätte diesen Fall natürlich lösen können, ohne dass es zu einer Eskalation gekommen ist. Es ist zu einer Eskalation gekommen, vorwiegend deswegen, weil, muss man sagen, die kasachischen administrativen Behörden das nicht besonders professionell gehandelt haben, aber nichtsdestotrotz ist es dann auch während der Gerichtsverhandlungen politisch geworden. Politisch deswegen, weil die kasachische Regierung zum Beispiel die Rosa Tuletaeva als eine politische Extremistin dargestellt hat, als eine Terroristin, die das Ganze angezettelt hat. Und es ging hier nicht um einen politischen Hintergrund, sondern es ging darum, dass die Arbeitnehmer ihre Rechte eingefordert haben auf eine ganz legitime Lohnerhöhung. Und deswegen fände ich das schon sehr wichtig, dass wir darauf hinweisen in diesem Bericht, dass es sich hier um einen offensichtlich politisch motivierten Prozess handelte.
Thank you very much. I now call on Mr. Voridis from Greece to speak on this amendment. You have the floor, and then we ask the rapporteur his opinion.
Thank you, Chair. The way I have 2 rather procedural but maybe essential in a way points to make. The first is that the draft resolution, I think, correctly avoids in mentioning specific cases and taking specific position, because in order to have this position, then you obviously need to have an elaborate information about what actually was happening in every specific case before, going in conclusions that may condemn the state, and especially saying that it's actually intervening politically in a legal procedure. So actually, I think that if we accept the amendment, we are taking a completely different position from the position adopted by the resolution, since we are starting to refer to specific cases. And the second thing is, and I'm talking personally, that I'm receiving different kind of information, pieces of information. One of that's coming from those who proposed the amendment, but the others coming from the authorities of Kazakhstan, that they argue that they didn't actually did such things, that it was actually trying to find the cause of the huge events and of violence caused during those events, and that they actually condemned the authorities that they overreacted and handled very badly the whole incident. So I'm not in a position to have the whole piece of information needed to arrive at a conclusion that would condemn Kazakhstan in such a specific way.
Thank you, Mr. Voridis. We now ask our rapporteur his opinion on the amendment. You have the floor, sir.
Chairman, thank you. This is a difficult one. And first of all, let me say that I also, with all of you, deeply regret what happened there. But in my draft resolution, and it is also more or less said by my Greek colleague, I didn't refer to any specific country. So in this field, I tried to tackle the themes on judicial independence, on prison reforms, on the chairman, and the key word for me is transparency. And if I listen to our colleague from Monaco, and I listen to our colleague from Kazakhstan, also the information is not quite clear. And this amendment also is related and referring to amendment number 21 and amendment number 24. It's dealing with all the more or less same issue. Secondly, I would be also careful about the use of political prosecution, because we were not there. And if we use too easy this term, it will create, I think, an inflation. Because was it a strike which ended in a tragedy? Was it a dispute among workers and the factory owners? I don't know. So it is for me as followed, Mr. Chairman, and I would also look this amendment in the line of amendment number 21 and 24, and I would also advise the following, because as a lawyer and a former judge, it is for me also a little bit difficult where amendment number 24 asks for an investigation and a research. We already do some conclusions in amendment 15 and 21. So I think it is wise and sensible to have research or an investigation, and afterwards it should be wise to do a conclusion. So that would my proposal, as it is stated here. I'm not in favor, because there are too many doubts and more principle. I, in my draft resolutions, did not point to any specific country. If we do that, then I can also table more, and it would be also not fair to Kazakhstan.
Okay, so this is the position expressed by the rapporteur. I think we had a thorough discussion on this issue, and still probably a question open. So I would propose that we put amendment number 15 to the vote, presented by Mr. Gardetto. Those in favor of amendment 15, please raise your cards. We have to count. Okay. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. So amendment number 15 is rejected. I call now on Ms. Heidi Fry from Canada to propose amendment number 16. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 11 that says, mindful of the United Nations General Assembly resolutions on the rules for the treatment of women prisoners and non-custodial measures for women offenders of 16th of March 2011, and on strengthening crime prevention and criminal justice responses to violence against women. And I think if we recall that the United Nations General Assembly resolution on the rules for treatment of women prisoners speaks about paying an increased attention to women in prisons and regarding their children, and what the problems are with regard to women in prisons who have children, and what are ways that we can resolve those problems so that women and their children are not necessarily deprived of the child's rights because the mother happens to be in prison. The other part is to look at alternatives to imprisonment of women, and to look at minimum rules for the treatment of women in prisons, so that in fact we may look at ways in which we can find alternatives to imprisoning women wherever possible. I think we also need to pay attention to the fact that because of poverty and because of lack of access to justice in many instances, and because of systemic violence against women, many of them commit crimes in response to violence and in response to their poverty, and quite often some of that is prostitution, in which some places is illegal, so that in many ways they become criminals and are not really should be imprisoned in particular for some of those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against amendment number 16? No, so we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I support this amendment because I think it complements the text.
Thank you very much. So we put the amendment to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? None. So amendment number 16 is adopted. Adesso invece chiedo all'onorevole Allegrini della delegazione italiana di presentare l'emendamento numero 17.
Sì, signor Presidente, ritengo che questa risoluzione esamini in maniera frontale e incisiva problematiche vitali per la nostra Assemblea e in particolare per la nostra Commissione. Il diritto al giusto processo, l'esecuzione della pena con fini riabilitativi, l'indipendenza del potere giudiziario, l'affermazione di livelli minimi di dignità delle condizioni dei detenuti nelle carceri. Inoltre, la definitiva messa al bando di tortura e di persecuzioni e discriminazioni per i più vari motivi viene qui affermata senza reticenze. Vengono citati una serie di documenti e norme alle quali i nostri paesi devono definitivamente informarsi e conformarsi, avendoli nella maggior parte dei casi sottoscritti. Ritengo con il mio emendamento completare ulteriormente il documento con un esplicito riferimento alla necessità di impegnarci come OSCE e quindi ciascuno nel proprio paese a ricreare con azioni positive opportunità e risorse per i discriminati, soprattutto nelle situazioni di conflitto e post-conflitto. Non basta garantire libertà e diritti umani e politici, ma intervenire tutte quelle volte che la dignità umana è stata calpestata e ristabilire risorse umane e materiali, eliminando frustrazioni culturali e sociali e ogni antagonismo. È implicito il riferimento alle vittime delle violazioni dei diritti umani in ogni modo e per ogni causa perpetrate.
Grazie mille. Now, anybody wish to speak against amendment number 17? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, there was something wrong in my text, so I was trying to solve it, but to be short, I believe also in the importance of moral resources, so I support this amendment.
You support the amendment?
Yep.
All right. So we go to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? 2 abstentions. So amendment number 17 is approved. I now call on Ms. Mazai to present amendment number 18 from Belarus. You have the floor, madam.
Спасибо, господин председатель. В этой поправке мы не меняем содержание предложенного пункта резолюции, но поскольку он отражает достаточно узкий аспект правозащитной тематики, но при этом цитируется перечень документов Организации Объединенных Наций по этой теме крайне неполный, я понимаю, что включить полный перечень – это перегрузить текст. Поэтому мы предлагаем вместо «ссылаясь на» взять словосочетание «принять к сведению», то, что посчитал нужным наш докладчик принять к сведению по этой теме. Спасибо.
Thank you, Ms. Mazai. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I propose to be against this amendment. I stick to my original text because noting is probably too light for this issue to say, so I'm against this amendment.
Thank you very much. So we proceed to vote. Those in favor of amendment number 18, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Thank you. So amendment number 18 is rejected. We move to amendment number 19, and I call again on Ms. Mazai to present it.
Уважаемые коллеги, ирландское председательство в ОБСЕ одним из своих приоритетов взяло работу в области человеческого измерения. Поэтому мы предлагаем добавить после пункта 11 пункт, который отмечает большую работу действующего ирландского председательства в ОБСЕ в области человеческого измерения. Спасибо.
Thank you. Anybody against this amendment? No? So we ask the rapporteur his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I have no any problems to support this amendment, so it's okay with me.
All right, so we vote on amendment number 19. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? One abstention. So the amendment number 19 is approved. We move to the number 20. Ms. Mazai, you have the floor from Belarus.
Мы предлагаем отметить этой поправкой необходимость поощрения терпимости и недискриминации, а также борьбы с любыми видами экстремизма, которые являются предпосылками для проявления терроризма. Данная поправка органично увяжет текст нашей резолюции с проектом резолюции противодействие связанному с насилием, экстремизму и радикализации, ведущим к терроризму, которую подготовили наши швейцарские коллеги. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Anybody against this amendment? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor, sir.
Chairman, I can support this amendment because, as you know, last year I proposed a resolution or a supplementary item on the theme of radicalization, which could to terrorism, and I'm really severe on this issue, so I think I welcome this amendment.
Thank you. So we vote on amendment number 20. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? None. Abstentions? One abstention. So amendment number 20 is adopted. I call now Mr. Gardetto from Monaco to present amendment number 21. You have the floor.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, cet amendement donc, fait référence aux mêmes événements de Sennhausen à propos des grèves des ouvriers de l'industrie pétrolière, dans la mesure où, à la suite de ces événements, le journaliste Igor Lara du journal Svoboda Slava a été tabassé et battu de manière très sérieuse pour avoir écrit des articles sur ces grèves. Et de la même manière, 3 leaders de l'opposition ont été emprisonnés pendant 2 semaines pour avoir tenu des manifestations non autorisées, toujours en relation avec ces grèves. Notre Assemblée, je le rappelle, avait émis une déclaration sur la question de la liberté de réunion au Kazakhstan cette année sur ce même sujet. Donc il s'agit simplement d'un rappel à respecter les libertés de réunion, d'expression des médias. Voilà, c'est-à-dire une liberté fondamentale, un simple rappel.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? Okay. Mr. Ahmed, Ms. Buchkova from Kazakhstan, you have the floor, madam.
Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые коллеги, мы считаем не вполне обоснованным связывать события в Жанаозене с соблюдением Казахстаном обязательств в области свободы выражения, средств массовой информации и собраний. Как уже говорилось, в основе событий в Жанаозене лежала неурегулированность трудовых споров между сотрудниками нефтяных компаний и работодателями. При этом нефтяники бастовали на главной площади города на протяжении длительного времени. Они выражали свою позицию. Средства массовой информации об этом свободно показывали и писали. То есть обеспечивалась свобода собраний, выражений и средств массовой информации. Несмотря на режим чрезвычайного положения, в январе текущего года жители региона приняли участие в парламентских выборах, тем самым воспользовались избирательным правом. При этом международные наблюдатели, включая миссию ОБСЕ, могли также наблюдать за процессом голосования. В этой связи хотелось бы подчеркнуть еще раз, что мы остаемся приверженными развитию демократического общества, защите фундаментальных свобод и прав человека, и мы будем и в дальнейшем продвигаться в этом направлении. Просим данную поправку не принимать. Спасибо.
Thank you. I have another speaker, Viola von Kramon from Germany, and then if someone wants to speak Against, we have one more possibility. You have the floor, madam.
Dankeschön. Ja, es geht ja hier auch nicht um eine Verurteilung Kasachstan an irgendeiner Stelle. Wenn man das bei der vorherigen Amendment so gesehen haben mag, dann ist das ja hier ganz explizit nicht der Fall, sondern es geht hier darum, an Kasachstan zu appellieren, die Freiheit des Wortes und die Freiheit der Medien und der Versammlungsfreiheit zu respektieren. Und wir hatten gerade einen Fall, da sollte ein Goethe-Preisträger, der jetzt im August in Deutschland geehrt werden sollte, der war verhaftet worden, weil er offensichtlich auch die Aufstände in Janaozen mit unterstützt hatte. Mit ganz großem internationalem Druck aus der Künstlerszene, mit unserem politischen Druck aus Deutschland, ist Bolat Atabayev jetzt wieder freigekommen. Das ist auch gut so, das genau wollten wir erreichen. Aber ich glaube, Kasachstan würde sich einen großen Gefallen tun, wenn es eben nicht an vielen Stellen, wie auch Herr Gadette das vorgetragen hat, diese Defender, also diese Menschenrechtsverteidiger inhaftiert und teilweise auch im Gefängnis sogar foltert, sondern eben genau die Pressefreiheit und die Versammlungsfreiheit respektiert.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak on this issue? If not, we ask the rapporteur to give us his opinion. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I repeat, regretting deeply what's happened there. And it's referring also again to this tragic events related also to amendment number 15. I would like to point out that if we appeal on the freedom of media, we not only appeal to one country, we all appeal to the 56 member states of the OSCE. And as I argued before, I tried in my draft resolution not mention specific countries. So I repeat that, and therefore I am not in favor of this amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we put amendment number 21 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Those against, please raise your cards. Abstentions? 4 abstentions, so amendment number 21st is rejected. We now move to amendment number 22, and I call on Mr. Rashkin from the Russian Federation to speak on this issue.
Уважаемые коллеги, мы предлагаем изложить пункт 13 в другой редакции, который более верно отражал нормы и принципы ОБСЕ, заложенные во всех ее нормативных документах. Мы предлагаем изложить ее таким образом. Вновь обращается с призывом к государствам-участникам ОБСЕ строго соблюдать правила консенсуса в процессе принятия решений на основе суверенного равенства государств в соответствии с решением СМИТ ОБСЕ МСДС 19/6. Это более отражает мнение и нормативные документы ОБСЕ. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we call on the rapporteur to give us his opinion. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I strongly, repeat strongly, against this amendment because the consensus rule is the noose around the neck of this organization, I think, and will serve as its coffin. So I'm really strongly against this amendment.
Thank you. So we move to vote on amendment number 22. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. So amendment number 22 is defeated. Amendment number 23, Ms. Heidi Fry, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the last time you'll be hearing from me on this issue. But I wanted to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 15 that actually encourages participating states to continue to strengthen the gender balance of all components of the justice system, including police and judges. And I think while gender sensitivity training of the judiciary and police and guards and prison, etc., is a good thing to do, I think if we had a gender balance with enough women in the judiciary and women in police and women in every aspect of the justice system, you might find that they bring that gender sensitivity themselves and probably have a better understanding of the problems that women face within the justice system, again, based on poverty and on systemic violence. So that basically is what the gist of this particular amendment is about.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor.
Chairman, this complements and broadens my text, I think, so I'm in favor of.
Thank you. So we put amendment number 23 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Those against? None? Abstentions? One abstention, 2 abstentions. So the amendment number 23 is adopted. I now call on Mr. Jean-Charles Gardetto from Monaco to present amendment number 24. You have the floor, sir.
Monsieur le Président, c'est toujours un amendement que nous avons co-signé, vous et moi, et qui fait référence aux mêmes événements. Il a été signalé des allégations que les accusés ont subi des abus de la part des forces de sécurité, notamment les éléments à charge auraient été obtenus sous la torture, les personnes concernées ayant été étouffées avec des sacs plastiques ou battues de manière très sérieuse. Donc cet amendement fait suite aussi à une résolution du Parlement européen qui a demandé aux autorités du pays de conduire des enquêtes significatives. Donc cet amendement a pour but effectivement de demander aux autorités kazakhes de coopérer pour que des enquêtes soient faites afin de déterminer si les éléments à charge ayant servi à condamner les personnes dans cette affaire de Zanazoen ont été obtenus sous la torture.
Thank you, Mr. Gardetto. I now call on Ms. Bichkova from Kazakhstan to speak against this amendment.
Большое спасибо. Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые коллеги. Процесс расследования и судебного рассмотрения уголовных дел после событий в Жанаозене проходил в условиях полной прозрачности, гласности, участия общественности. Представители как казахстанских, так и зарубежных средств массовой информации, неправительственных организаций, специально созданный общественный совет, общественные наблюдательные комиссии и авторитетные организации PRI, Международная тюремная реформа, имели возможность посещать места ограничения свободы и свободно общаться с задержанными. Все заявления о пытках, все буквально, были рассмотрены судом и не подтвердились. После этого обжалования не последовало. Сам Казахстан приглашал и всех вас приглашает к сотрудничеству. Всех тех, кто желает лично убедиться в неприменении пыток. Парламент Казахстана в настоящее время рассматривает законопроект о национальном превентивном механизме, реализуя факультативный протокол Конвенции против пыток. Таким образом, государство само инициирует всяческое взаимодействие с международными организациями в этом направлении. Просим нам доверять и воспользоваться нашим приглашением. Спасибо.
Thank you, Ms. Bichkova. I now have our colleague from Germany. Here's the floor.
Liebig ist mein Name. Dankeschön, Herr Vorsitzender. Im Einklang mit dem, was die Kollegin aus Kasachstan gerade gesagt hat, denke ich, spricht viel dafür, diesen Veränderungsvorschlag aufzunehmen, weil er ja lediglich den Appell beinhaltet, in der Zusammenarbeit mit internationalen Organisationen in diesem Sachverhalt fortzufahren. Ich denke, dass das nur nützen kann. Und Herr Nazarbayev selbst hat ja auch eine Untersuchungskommission angekündigt. Insofern, das gemeinsam mit internationalen Institutionen zu machen, ist nur sinnvoll. Das Argument unseres Berichterstatters, dass er in seinem Text kein einziges Land namentlich erwähnt, verstehe ich. Das ist dann auch konsequent. Andererseits schrecken wir auch bei anderen Tagesordnungspunkten nicht davor zurück, in zusätzlichen Beratungsgegenständen uns mit Ländern wie Ukraine, Belarus auseinanderzusetzen. Und ich glaube, dass das in diesem Sachverhalt auch angemessen wäre.
Thank you. I now have Mr. Voridis from Greece on my list, and then we ask the rapporteur his opinion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't intervene, but it does strike me as something strange to appeal to a specific state and ask them to cooperate with international organization, because this is obviously a general appeal concerning all the states in all cases. So if we want to make a specific appeal, then that needs, in order to be well-founded, to have evidence that this state has not cooperated with international organizations. Otherwise, we do have the general appeal for all the states. So I wonder, do we have a case for Kazakhstan like that? Does Kazakhstan did not cooperate with international organizations in order to see whether those allegations about torture are correctly investigated and punished. But in order to accept this amendment, then you do need to have specifically say that Kazakhstan did not work with those international organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Voridis. I now call on the rapporteur to give us his opinion on this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, in response to my colleague from Germany, of course, it is others free to mention or not mention specific countries. But in my whole draft resolution, I didn't mention, and that is quite consistent, I think. And the answer for supporting this is also more or less given by my colleague from Greece. I think all the states, in all the cases, should cooperate. And if it is stated by the Kazakhs that, for example, the Penal Reform Organization, its foreign organization, is already involved in this matter, in this investigation, I think that's also good to hear, and also good to hear that there are improvements. So I remain not in favor of this amendment.
All right, so we move to vote amendment number 24 by Mr. Gardetto. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Those against? Abstentions? 6 abstentions. So amendment number 24 is rejected. We now move, I think, to the last amendment, because it's 5 minutes to 4, which is number 25, and I call on Ms. Mazai from Belarus to speak on this issue. You have the floor, madam.
Спасибо, господин председатель. У меня серьезное затруднение с пунктом 16 и наше предложение этот пункт удалить. Поскольку в Ословской декларации, на которую ссылается автор, было отмечено, это декларация нашей парламентской ассамблеи, я цитирую, признает существенную роль Интерпола в борьбе с транснациональной преступностью и коррупцией и призывает государства-участники избегать подрыва доверия к этому важнейшему учреждению в результате размещения в системе Интерпола политически мотивированных или каких-либо других ненадлежащих уведомлений. То сомнение, которое высказывает автор наш, предлагая 16 пункт, этот смысл искажает декларации. Поэтому я думаю, что с таким пунктом согласиться просто некорректно. Спасибо.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak against this amendment? If not, we call on our rapporteur to give us his opinion.
Mr. Chairman, to be honest, I think that this is a crucial element. And to be realistic also is that we should avoid that Interpol is misused in the whole system of justice. So therefore it is crucial, and therefore it is crucial to remain as it is, and therefore I'm against this amendment.
All right, thank you. So we move to vote on amendment number 25. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Okay. Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. So amendment number 25 is rejected. I think we have time for another amendment, and I call on Mr. Rashkin to speak on this issue on amendment number 26.
Уважаемые коллеги, поскольку в международном праве отсутствует определение термина «политические заключенные», что часто ведет, в общем-то, к политизированной трактовке этого понятия, и мы знаем многочисленные случаи, когда взрывают бомбу, и затем тот, кто взорвал, уничтожено много населения и было страданий, объявляет себя политическим заключенным. Мы знаем также случаи, когда насильник женщин, детей идет в депутаты разного уровня и объявляет себя политическим заключенным, и только на этом основании мы тогда этой резолюцией будем таких насильников поддерживать. И еще, значит, есть ряд случаев, когда целые микрорайоны терроризируются определенной группой террористов, которые выступают против якобы государственного устройства и называют себя политическими заключенными. Поэтому я бы считал, что поскольку в международном праве отсутствует определение термина «политический заключенный», исключить данный пункт. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Rashkin. Our friend Gordana from Serbia has asked the floor, please.
Strongly against deleting the paragraph 17, fully understanding why do we have interpretation of what does it mean to be a political prisoner. And explanation is actually quite simple. When you live in the country, when someone is a political prisoner, then you know definition exactly, clearly, and have no doubts. So it is very, very important for us, members of Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE, but also for all the country members, to acknowledge that there are countries, but we do not agree to ever will be in the future country that would arrest a man, a woman, for political expressions, because that's what political prisoners are all about. If there are doubts, if the person is in custody because of the political views or a criminal act, then there is more necessity for such paragraph, because it's up to the authorities of the state to make it quite clear what kind of criminal act in transparent process proven the person have done. No one of us would ever protect a criminal, but I think that it's in our nature to remind everyone that being in prison for defending political freedom of your own political expressions or political freedom of other person is something what we are standing against very strongly, and as long as this organization is defending human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordana. And we ask now the rapporteur his opinion, and then we proceed to vote.
Mr. Chairman, the words and the arguments of my colleague Ruskin is not convincing me, to be honest, because there is also not an international definition of terrorism, but we all know what it is. So I stick to my original text. I think that's a good one, and I'm against this amendment.
So we move to vote on amendment number 26. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? So amendment number 26 is rejected. So we conclude now the work of this afternoon session, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. This room, I guess, probably the same room, and we will continue with amendments, and then we have 2 more supplementary items to be discussed by the committee. So have a good afternoon and evening tonight. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.